Hi everyone, good morning. For those already in the room, we are just, we'll go till about a few minutes past the hour to let people join the call, and then we'll get going. Morning to everybody joining. Sorry for the silence. We're just letting everybody log in and then we'll get going a few minutes past 10. Good morning to those joining. I'll give everybody a couple more minutes and then we'll get going on the agenda. Okay, then good morning, everyone. I'll just start speaking as we let others join the call. Thanks ever so much for being here today with us. This represents I suppose the sort of official launch of the MACC program, now that both the MACC Hub, which started last year, and the MACC projects are now live. So we're about 2 hours, and this is the agenda. So we'll start with some opening remarks from myself, and we'll hear from Katy Peat from Defra, who tell us about the kind of inception of the MACC program. We'll then go into, we'll have a panel discussion where we will hear from different key adaptation actors about their vision for a well-adapted UK. And we'll also hear, importantly, from the 6 MACC projects that have just got started at the beginning of the year. But in between, we are going to give everyone a chance to feed in and to contribute. We want to hear from you. So there will be 3 different Mentimeter exercises, love them or hate them, brought to you by different members of the MACC team. So, but I'll sort of, if I go to the agenda, so we'll have one on sort of priorities and levers of change for climate adaptation in the UK from Stephen Jones at Climate Northern Ireland, Giovanna Gini from, there's a hand up, would you like to speak? Can everybody hear okay? Yes, great. Oh, I love all those hands up. Thank you, thank you. Yeah. So then we'll have Giovanna Gini will give us some, we want to seek impact on the way that we translate kind of knowledge into action. And then we'll sort of have a bit of a chat around flexible fund priorities and the flexible fund that's under the MACC project. You know, what would your priorities be for how that money is spent? We'll have a little section at the end about how to get involved. Just a few things. Obviously, we're recording, so I hope everybody's happy to be recorded. We've muted the chat function, but we have a Q&A function. So please do use the Q&A function. And what we'll do is, if we probably won't get to it during this session, but we will ensure that we answer all questions in a follow-up email. The Mentimeter QR code is there, but we hope if we've got the tech right, you should also just be able to do it directly through your screens as well. So what I'll do then, if that's the agenda, we'll have a quick break at an hour just to get people away from their screens. But other than that, we'll just push through. So what I'll do is I will, without further ado, I think I'll pass over to Katy to introduce the MACC programme for us.
Thank you very much, Helen, and thanks everyone for joining us this morning. It's really great to see so many people with an interest in the programme, and it's really nice to come and talk to you now that it's up and running. I think I've probably spoken to a few people in various stages of inception of this project and putting out the funding calls, and we're now at the really, really exciting bit where we get to see some work happening. So if I can move on to the next slide. I guess the main point to make here is I'm here from Defra today, but this has been a very collaborative effort between us and UKRI. This is a joint funded programme, equally funded by Defra and UKRI, particularly the Natural Environment Research Council, but with input from all of the UKRI research councils. And this is as part of the third National Adaptation Programme, which was published in July 2023. We committed to doing extra research on what the different levers and enablers were around climate change adaptation. And so if I move on to the next slide, these are some of the core principles that we put together when we were coming into this. So some of you might remember one of the predecessor UKRI funded programmes, which was the UK Climate Resilience Programme funded under the Strategic Priorities Fund. Now, with the new funding mechanisms that UKRI have, we have these impact themes where we can tie them much more closely to policy outputs. And I think while we felt we were getting some really fascinating insights from the UK Climate Resilience Programme and some really good applied research as well, what we wanted to do is move it from some of the more discovery science into the applied space. And when we were thinking through what research levers we have, one of the big ones that we have in Defra is through the UK Climate Change Risk Assessment, which our team also manages. And that tells us an awful lot about climate risk. And then we have a National Adaptation Programme, which tells you what we intend to do about that. And the devolved governments have their own national adaptation programmes, which also respond to the UK CCRA. What we don't have is that research and innovation to really help us meet those actions and meet those targets, and recognising that it's not just about understanding climate hazard, but also understanding much more about vulnerability and exposure, and also what the different response types should be and how those work in practice. So we really wanted to come up with a programme that would help us to drive those reductions in exposure and vulnerability to climate risks, and think about it in a people-centric way, think about ecosystems, economy, infrastructure, and also what happens when different effects happen at different times, how they compound, how they cascade. And we know that there's an awful lot of adaptation going on out there. It can be quite sporadic, it can be quite piecemeal. How do we scale that up? How do we make sure that we are learning from those best practices and not just sort of containing them to pilot studies or nice to haves? And that's really what we wanted to get to when we were putting together this programme, is think about, you know, for those people out there doing really good adaptation, how can we help them do more, and how can we help others make sure that they're getting the best from that? So if I go to the next slide. I won't dwell on this too much because you're going to hear a lot about this through today's talks, but the first part of the programme to be let was the Hub, which is being led by Helen and a massive team embedded in many parts of the country, and doing really great work to understand what's going on across different sectors and different layers of adaptation already. And we've just let these 6 projects as well, which very excited to hear more about today. But I don't know if anyone's able to access that link there, otherwise we'll make sure you've got it afterwards, but that gives us you a bit more of a flavour of what's been let there. But from our perspective, you know, what we're really keen to learn about from the Hub and the projects is what's more than the sum of its parts. We're going to get really great new insights from all of this work, but also how do we enable that? So there's this flexible fund, which you're going to discuss later on today. We're also looking at what we can be picking up in a rapid response way, and we've been working with Helen and the team, and also across government to understand what sort of policies might be coming online that would benefit from these insights, and how can we quickly get the information out of this programme and synthesise it into government work so that we're being quick off the mark to pick it up and use it as well. So that's all I really wanted to say, but hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about what we were trying to achieve when we set out with this. We're incredibly happy with the way the programme's shaping up, and just at this stage, just very excited to see what happens next. But we know it also only benefits if it's being picked up, utilised, engaged with by everybody else. So I'm also really happy that today you're all going to get an opportunity to ask some questions, and also think about how it might relate to your work and how best you can get involved as well. So I think that is me, and I think there's just a thank you slide on the back of this, at which point I'll hand back over to Helen.
Thank you very much. And I didn't actually introduce myself, did I, in all the starting fun of the Hub, so of the webinar. So I'm Helen Adams. Yep, I lead the MACC Hub, and we sort of just pulled everyone together for this this webinar. So basically, I'm just going to present a brief overview. Some of you probably will have seen some of these slides before on the MACC Hub and our goals, because I think we have sort of 2 sets of objectives, I suppose. Next slide, please, Shreya. I think, so for us, we are a knowledge coordination and synthesis hub, but our goal is to unlock transformative change for a well-adapted UK. So for us, we're looking for pushing that vision of what the UK could be in a climate change future. Our goal is to bring together the UK adaptation community. We want to add value, we want to elevate, we want to catalyse, and we want to draw out and share what works on adaptation. As Katy said, we've got a real focus. Our focus is the doing of adaptation and understanding what to do, what not to do to drive adaptation action. Our role is to support the National Adaptation Programme and those processes, but also diverse actors across the board to advance adaptation. And as I say, we want to centre vulnerability. So we want to drive adaptation and advance adaptation action that really puts the most vulnerable first and challenges those conditions that lead people to be exposed to the worst climate impacts. Thank you. Next slide, please, Shreya. Now, these are the, I won't go through this slide, but these are all the partners who are engaged in the MACC Hub. So we have a secretariat at King's College London, and we have 4 regional spokes. So London and the rest of England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. And I think the key point I wanted to make here is that we're working through the networks that already exist. So we're not trying to build a new network. What we're trying to do is to connect the networks that exist and to leverage existing action the best that we can. So we're here fundamentally to help people do what they're doing better, if that's good English. But we have partners throughout the UK and networks throughout the UK, and connecting the different actors across the UK is a big priority for us. The next slide, please, Shreya. So what are we actually doing? I think a big part, if you start at the end, is our flexible fund. So as Katy mentioned, we have 600,000 in funding that will go out for trialling transformational adaptation projects and learning by doing. So sort of assessing adaptation as we do it to draw out best practice and to draw out learnings that can be shared more widely. Another big part, as Katie mentioned, if you go to the third point, is a policy response unit and responding to the needs of government and policy to see how we can drive alignment there. And then we have actions like policy labs to sort of deal with concrete bottlenecks that are identified through the process, through all this work we're doing on the hub. We will have a knowledge platform hosted by We Adapt, which we'll hear a little bit more about at the end, which will be a key way for us to share best practice and a key way for people to promote the activities that they're doing and the networks that they're part of. If I move up in this, I think a big part of what we're also doing is generating new knowledge to fill those knowledge gaps that are preventing adaptation and holding adaptation back. So we have research projects, we have knowledge sprints, so bringing people together in a rapid way to sort of solve key problems. And we have some risk mapping work, working with OpenClim. But moving up to the top, a key part of what we're doing is bringing people together to find out where we are. I suppose that's a big part of what we're doing at the moment, is understanding the barriers and our current levers of change, but also thinking about training and engagement to help people do the work that they're doing better. So we have sort of activities on, for example, systems thinking or using weather data more effectively to plan for adaptation. So they're really the activities that we'll be doing over the next 3 years. Next slide, I think that might be the final slide. Thank you very much. So they were just we've kept it very, very brief because we wanted to sort of give time in this for people to engage and to give us their views. And so I'm going to pass over to Stephen to give us the first Mentimeter, where we want to ask you some questions about priorities for climate change adaptation in the UK.
Thanks very much, Helen. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Stephen Jones. I work for Northern Ireland Environment Link. I'm in the Climate Northern Ireland team, so some of you might be familiar with that. Shreya is going to share a screen, so if you wouldn't mind, we're keen to hear from yourselves today and do a couple of Menti exercises throughout the morning. And so the first one is going to be on, well, a little bit, the first couple of questions are about finding out from yourselves what kind of organization you are and see who we have on the call here. And thank you. So many of you were organized and know exactly how to work these things. So thanks for scanning the QR code there as well. Perhaps Shreya, you would put the Menti code in the chat for anybody that didn't have the chance to scan the QR code as well, please. That'd be brilliant.
Sorry, I'll go back, Stephen. This is the QR code everybody can, scan from their phones or any other devices. But if you can see the screen that I'm sharing, everybody can, respond from their screens as well if they try.
So
yeah,
we're even more advanced than I knew. There you go. So you can click on the screen as well and just put in your information through there. That's even easier. No excuses now. So look, it's great. We've got a few minutes for this, so I'm keen to see who is on the call. And you can use the interactive element on your screen. If you've got any questions, I'm sure some of the team will pick it up in the chat box, the Q&A. So quite a few researchers on the call, which is brilliant. Local authorities then, private sector, quite a few from central government as well, which is great. Public sector more broadly, good engagement. If you've voted other, do feel free to post in the chat as well. What other organizations could we include for next time? So I'll give this just another kind of 20 seconds or so if you want to engage. It's always useful just to help understand, who is engaged, work out what kind of activities and messages are useful for the folks on the call here. Right. Okay, well, look, I think we'll leave that question there because the next one I'm keen to get on to is around location. So try to understand, the kind of regional variation that we have here on the call, and it'd be great to see who we've got. That's one of the things that we're trying to understand through the hub, through the projects as well, is kind of push on this UK-wide piece. And the research, understanding, of course, that UK-wide picture, but also then the regional pictures as well. Think about the drivers that are specific to particular regions in the UK. Some of the cross-border elements, particularly in Northern Ireland, that I would be interested in as well, and some of the unique kind of geographical or social aspects to the work needing done on adaptation. So quite a few from England, and then sort of a reasonable spread across some of the other locations as well. Give another kind of 10 seconds for this one, and then we'll move on.
Sorry, Stephen, just to say, there's a few people in the chat who can't see this, who are getting a blank screen. It's working for me and obviously working for a few others, but if there is a link that we could share for those people who aren't able to access, I think that would be helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you, Katie. Perhaps Shreya then can have that in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, do feel free to post in the chat as well if there's anything that you want to share throughout the meeting as well.
Just to come in again, Stephen, we've turned off the chat because it can be quite distracting. So we're encouraging people to use the Q&A so we can get back. I think sometimes you can have a sidebar chat, which I think could be quite distracting. So yeah, but please do put any questions or anything you want further information in the Q&A.
Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. Okay, well, I think we'll move on to the next one then. Hopefully the link to the Menti can be shared. And we'll move on to the third question then. So there's two kind of substantive questions we wanted to understand from you all today. So thinking about one as less effective and 5 being kind of excellent progress. How would you describe the UK's adaptation progress in the following areas? And this is going to come up as a series of kind of a scale of 1 to 5 and a sliding scale. So you kind of add in your number there, and we'll get a readout of it on the screen here. So thinking about the first one, clear vision and pathways to a well-adapted UK, certainly something that we're going to be thinking about increasingly with the Climate Change Committee report on the well-adapted UK that's due to come out next year. Effective UK-wide partnerships. Helen's already touched on some of those elements that would be keen to kind of work on through the hub and develop up those existing partnerships. But how well are those going to date? Policy coherence and evidence coherence, thinking about particularly on policy then the mainstreaming of adaptation and also the coherence of policy as relates to maybe a particular region. All right, and so I think we have here a code. So if anybody isn't on this already, I can read out a code for you here. So we've got menti.com, if you want to menti.com, and then type in the following. So 623-03122. So that's menti.com, and I'll read that code again for you. So the code that you type into menti.com is the following: 623-03122. 623-03122. So hopefully that gets anybody on who wasn't able to engage previously there. And you'll excuse a few little technical issues this morning. So policy coherence, evidence coherence, implementation, resourcing, and just transition as well. So I'll give this one just another minute or two. We're seeing evidence coherence as currently perhaps the area that we're doing the best across the UK. Less so on resourcing. A clear vision and pathways to a well-adapted UK and effective UK partnerships, sort of in and around the same. Nothing scoring much over halfway, which is interesting. So that suggests work to do, and policy coherence not scoring particularly highly there. All right. I think we'll probably move on to the next and final question then. So thank you for your input so far. And the final one is going to be on a ranking scale. So what we want to understand here is your priorities for the next 12 months on adaptation in the UK. So this is going to be a ranking scale, and we're keen to understand which ones you think are the most important from first to eighth. So we've got a range of different things in here. The first on integrated governance and leadership, monitoring, learning and evaluation. We've got some stakeholder engagement, empowerment and inclusion, which Helen's touched on quite a lot there this morning already, and Katie. Funding, resource and investment, practical project planning and delivery, skills and training, data quality and access, and research and solutions. So we're seeing quite a big leap ahead for funding, resource and investment currently, which isn't a surprise. Stakeholder engagement, though, quite high up there as well. Practical project planning. So definitely more in that kind of implementation side of things. Give this just another kind of 30 seconds or so. And again, your input is very much appreciated. So funding definitely out ahead there. Funding, resource and investment, and then the kind of practical project planning side of things as well. Of course, none of these things are unimportant, but it's very useful to kind of understand people's, priorities and think about, the work through the hub and some of the things that we need to prioritize as well, and things that we need to ensure are included in the analysis and the outputs and that kind of thing, and make sure that we're meeting the moment in terms of what the priorities actually are for adaptation. So we'll give this another 10 seconds or so, I think, and then I'm going to hand it back after that. So it looks like implementation elements are right at the top here. So funding, resource and investment, practical project planning, stakeholder engagement, empowerment and inclusion. And so that kind of suggests then that we're at the stage where we need to get going on some of these things, and integrated governance probably then part of the process around how we do some of that. Data quality, research and solutions, all important as well, of course, but useful to have your input there. So thank you very much. Apologies again for the little kind of difficulty getting onto Menti for some of you there, but as it ever was, we'll make sure it's smoother next time. There'll be a couple more Mentis later on, so we're keen to hear from you again. And I'll hand back to Helen now just to take on the rest of the agenda. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. And yeah, I think it's well, either way, and I think we're always open. I mean, if we can always circulate, these questions afterwards, so people can feedback just in an email, with the answers, as their responses as well. So this won't be the only way to feed in. So with that, I'm going to pass over to Jude, who's going to chair a discussion for us on this idea of visioning a well-adapted UK and what that means to us. So I'll hand over to you, Jude.
Thanks, Helen. And hi, everyone. It's great to see so many people on the call today. So my name is Jude Hassall. I work for the Greater London Authority, and I am the manager of the London Climate Ready Partnership. And the partnership is the co-lead of the Hub's England work with Sustainability West Midlands and our academic partner, Brunel University. And I've got with me today the most amazing panel. Really leaders, advocates and genuine champions of adaptation across the UK. I'm delighted to welcome today Emma Howard-Boyd, who was the former chair of the Environment Agency and until very recently the chair of the London Climate Resilience Review. We've also got Victoria McGrean. She's an external consultant with National Trust Northern Ireland and a real champion for nature and the links between human and environmental health. David Clubb, who is chair of the National Infrastructure Commission for Wales, an expert in energy policy, public affairs and digital communications. And Rebecca Gibbs from the Scottish Communities Climate Action Network. And Rebecca is working on social adaptation to climate change. Can I ask all of my panelists to please turn your cameras on if you're here, just so we know we've got everyone in the room. And while you're doing that, we've got 30 minutes thereabouts. I've got a couple of questions. And firstly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my first panelist. I can't see you on screen, unfortunately, and I'm hoping you're there. Shreya, can you confirm the panelists are here?
Yes, Jude, they're all here.
Okay, great, fantastic. So the first question that I have, and we haven't got much time for this, so I'm going to ask you to be quite brief and maybe just a couple of minutes and sort of headline thoughts. What does a well-adapted UK look like? And I guess a supplementary to that is if there were no constraints from current policies or processes, so a real opportunity to dream big. I'm going to come to Emma first.
Hello, can you hear me, Jude? Hi, thank you, and great to be here. Great to be joining you from Freetown, Sierra Leone, where I am taking part in the African Urban Heat Summit that is taking place at a city level. And throughout all of these discussions, I think it's really important to think about what is happening at the city level as well as at the national level. You've asked that very, very simple question of, what is the vision? And we all need to know where we are heading for. And in the spirit of what an organisation like the MACC Hub can do is build off some of the existing brilliant work that we already have defining that. So I turn, when I'm asked this question, to the vision that was set out in a document that Defra and ScienceWise commissioned, published in July 2023, which used individuals across the UK to come up with a vision for what a well-adapted, in this case England, looks like. And I'm going to touch on a few highlights from it. It's found in the document, but talks about human safety, well-being, where people have access to basic services and well-maintained infrastructure. They live in a prosperous economy that capitalises on green opportunities and provides green jobs, sustainable agriculture, and increased urban space. Economic impacts of adaptation have been distributed fairly, with no exacerbation of existing inequalities. And it goes on to emphasise the importance of this being fundamental to all the work that is being done on net zero and nature. And I think in our work, because adaptation is non-negotiable, because it is so urgent, we need to quickly build on the work that's already been done. And I think the point I want to emphasise is make sure that it is understood by citizens wherever they are in the UK. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. I love that idea of building on existing work, not reinventing the wheel. That has already been some really, really strong work going on, including the work that you've done in London on the London Climate Resilience Review. And we need to acknowledge and build on that. You highlighted some of the issues around equity and fairness, and I'm going to ask Rebecca to come in at this point because, with your background in terms of social adaptation to climate change, Rebecca, I wonder whether you could give us your thoughts on what a well-adapted UK looks like.
Hello, everyone. I'd love to. So there are a couple of things I'd like to say, and one of them is just to really welcome the emphasis on equity. This has been really clear from the beginning of the MACC. MACC is a really good thing. It's really great that it's happening. And it's really great to see a focus which looks at inequality and how it intersects with the experience of climate impacts. It's a really sound way forward. There's loads of, I would imagine, old crocs as well as young crocs on this call, and they'll remember, the old crocs will remember Professor Nicholas Stern making that link in 2007, back in the day. Yeah, I'm getting a few nods. So what does it mean now? What does inequality, the match of inequality and climate impacts mean now? Well, I think a well-adapted UK is one where the research focus and the adaptation initiatives engage with the detailed reality of inequality as it's currently served up to communities who are struggling now. It's difficult for those not routinely using welfare services or leaning hard on public services to understand just how threadbare our systems are. Austerity is the enemy of resilience. Adaptation that is built on an assumption that we have 1970s levels of services or the kind of welfare available in other Northern European economies risks leaving those at the bottom of the income scale more rather than less vulnerable. Great strides are available to us if we work closely with social policy colleagues and third sector groups at the social coalface. An electricity outage which destroys everything in a freezer, maybe a small bump in the road for one household, or equivalent to losing life savings in another, where bog-offs, buy one, get one free, are being used to smooth shortfalls in income. The fine detail matters hugely, but we also need to be honest about what we can do with current resources available.
Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I mean, fascinating, and yes, you know, that equity and the sort of social aspect of adaptation and resilience is absolutely core to the work of the MACC Hub, and that sort of visioning around what does transformation look like with people at its heart. But you know, you noted, you know, even things like fridges breaking down and what that means to individuals. I'm going to come now to David. Because, you know, underpinning resilience is a lot of infrastructure that we rely on and depend on every day. Some of it we don't see. But I'm interested from an infrastructure perspective, David, what does a well-adapted UK look like from your side of things?
Yeah, thanks very much. What a beautiful segue. Well, we at the Infrastructure Commission, we've got a very interesting mandate. Our terms of reference say that we need to look from 5 to 80 years into the future. And that was something I specifically asked for because in my opinion, if we're thinking about infrastructure, our previous remit said 30 years into the future. Well, if we're building infrastructure, we should really be thinking about it as the Victorians did, which is this stuff going to last way beyond my lifetime? What sort of value does it provide to people in future generations? And of course, in Wales, all public bodies are obliged to align with the Future Generations Act, and long-term thinking is part of that. And I have to say that by and large, most public sector organisations are so busy firefighting that they don't even look up from what they're doing right now to imagine the challenges that might arise in 80 years. And I think it's helpful for decision makers to sit back and think about the needs of somebody being born in 2105 and to imagine what they might think about the decisions we're making now. So, for example, in Wales, we have a nature emergency and we have a climate emergency. I don't think, by and large, our decisions necessarily reflect the word emergency in that. I also think that the foundational stuff, the socio-economic duty, we might call it in Wales, which has already been raised, is incredibly important because adaptation, it shouldn't just be for people who can afford to adapt. So one of the key principles perhaps I might leave you with is a no regret idea. So we're aware of things around a changing climate, things getting warmer. It's not impossible, of course, that the AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, might start to fail, in which case Northwest Europe might become considerably colder. So measures that can help infrastructure adapt for both warming and cooling will pay dividends in the event of very uncertain outcomes. Things like home insulation. So when the government announced they were going to be spending upwards of £22 billion or of that order on carbon capture and storage, I thought, well, imagine what that could have done for a nationwide, by which I mean UK-wide programme of retrofit for buildings, for domestic properties, because we're losing a lot of wealth through heating, in particular, to different countries, paying for fossil fuels. We could have created employment across every region, every town and city of the UK. So that foundational economy, that local economy, as well as future-proofing on a no regrets basis, I think should be really key to strategic thinking.
Fantastic, thanks, David. Yeah, food for thought there, and also I love the fact that you've sort of brought into play that dealing with uncertainty, and how actually that no regrets approach is one way that we can deal with that uncertainty. I'm going to come to Victoria now. Victoria, the challenge for nature and you know, humankind is enormous, and obviously dealing with uncertainty is something that's really difficult for natural systems. So I wondered whether you could sort of comment a little bit on that from your perspective, and also talk us through your vision for a well-adapted UK. What does it look like?
Okay, thank you. Delighted to be joining you today from Northern Ireland, and glad to see that we've got so many people from NI on the call as well. So I'm joining you from Northern Ireland, where we are in the aftermath of a huge storm, and many of us are dealing with the clear up process. So I work for National Trust, and unfortunately we've had a lot of loss. So we're coming today very much with climate adaptation and resilience in mind, very, very fresh in our daily lives at the moment. So I suppose when we think about what a well-adapted UK looks like, ultimately for us, it's about a society that is healthier, it's resilient, and it's more equitable. So kind of building on some of the previous points around equity, that is a really important part of the long-term vision. For us, it's also about a future where our key societal systems, they have climate resilience embedded within decision making. So that's just not thinking about adaptation, it's about the longer term resilience. So part of National Trust's approach to adaptation is that we think about it as there is no end goal. There's no okay, we're now well adapted, guys. It's about developing a resilient way of thinking, and it's about embedding ways of making decisions into our society and into our organisations. So in a way, for me, I think about that as being in a state where we have the ability to make confident and informed decisions when we need to, and that we're using up-to-date data to inform our continuous adaptation. So for us, it's really about a way of embedding resilience into our ways of thinking. So one of the kind of the key points that we would make on that is around coordination. So we do need to have across the UK coordinated action. And a key thing that we would like to see is that adaptation becomes nested at the heart of government. So what we've seen, and it'll be no surprises to many on the call today, is that climate adaptation policy has always been the poor relation of climate mitigation, and that's likely because it's more difficult to predict what actions need to be taken, and also that research in this space is therefore lagging behind. So perhaps for us, one of the ways that we could see a well-adapted UK is one where at least adaptation is on an equal footing, and that we're continually developing our shared understanding and adjusting our sails. And then just one kind of final point on that, when we're thinking about a well-adapted UK, from a Northern Ireland perspective, it's really important to us that we don't just think about coordinated action across government remits and across sectors, but also across the administrative boundaries of these islands. So when we think about the UK, we also have to remember that we are part of a small group of islands on the edge of Europe, and we're facing similar climate hazards. So for us, enabling cross-border cooperations between governments at all levels in the UK and the island of Ireland, that's going to be important for increasing climate resilience. So yeah, let's not forget about adaptation in Ireland as an island as well, and let's not let that be a policy or collaboration blind spot. That would be one of my additional points around vision for the UK.
Thanks, Victoria. That was a really comprehensive approach. I'm going to hold on to you if I can, actually, because I think a couple of the things that you touched on relate to my next question. So I love the fact that you've really highlighted the need for systems thinking and not working in silos and working across both geographical boundaries, but also working out of organisational silos across different sectors and also with government. Government obviously has got a massive role to play. We have a legislative framework around adaptation, the National Adaptation Programme, and we've got NAP4 coming up, or being worked on rather. For that, so for the fourth National Adaptation Programme, what for your view would be the real priorities that government should address? And follow-on question, I guess, or link to it is, what are the critical actions or policy shifts that you'd like to see?
So great that we're at the stage that we have number 4 about to emerge. I think one of the key things that we need to see is really an increase in resourcing. And when I talk about resourcing, I'm talking about funding, but also building capacity within those key decision making bodies, and across the governments as well, to embed the actions and actually fast forward some of our actions and our delivery. So one of the key areas that we would like to see in terms of policy development, and something that we think could make a big difference, is taking forward a statutory duty so that public bodies make climate adaptation a key factor in their decision making. So thinking about that could be modelled on the Welsh statutory duty for the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. That's one of the key levers that we could see could shift us into a better future in this space. And then another area in terms of NAP, I kind of touched on it a bit earlier, is about building confidence and skills widely. So rather than concentrating on just a few places or a few people, it's about embedding that confidence and skills across society. And one of the experiences that we've had as National Trust, I mean, we've been grappling with adaptation for at least the last 20 years. And what we see and what we've learned is that there is no standardized approach that we can deliver everywhere. So yeah, really every place that needs to learn to adapt, it's different, and one size won't fit all. So one of the things that we're keen to see is that it's that kind of localized capacity to understand change and lead decisions at a local level, kind of nested within central and regional government systems too.
Fantastic, thanks, Victoria. Rebecca, can I bring you in at this point? So Victoria's talked a lot about capacity building and the need to, build capacity throughout the system. Your view on that, but also, NAP4, what do you think the priorities are coming forward? What would you say to government, some of whom are on the call right now, officers? But what would you like to see prioritised?
Yeah, thank you. So I think from my response, it's really to pan back and talk about the disjunct that can exist between the risk assessment and the NAP. And that feels very critical, and it feels very critical at ground level, at community level. And I'd like to just share with you some feedback from a colleague. So, this disjunct is kind of felt very keenly at ground level. My colleague, Kate Munro, who has been talking to those affected by Storm Babette, principally in Brecon, and folk alarmed by the visible erosion that's going on the Montrose coast. She talks about the fact that people feel very left behind, feel very left without a process or a plan. Residents have very low confidence in the decisions that are being taken. So to those who've walked their dogs along beaches all their lives, the initiatives don't appear at the moment to match the magnitude of the problem that they can see unfolding. And this is very unsettling. So I feel like, and I feel like the mood music on CCRA4 is really much stronger in terms of using the evidence and using that into implementation. But I think that needs to be really, really joined up.
Thanks, Rebecca. Emma, can I bring you in on this conversation as well? Rebecca's talked about that, disconnection between the reality that we see on the ground and actually the political response. You've been working with governments for years and are very familiar with the policy landscape. So I just wondered whether you could speak to that, but also again, the priorities that you think should shape NAP4.
Can you hear me okay? Have I managed to unmute myself? Thank you. There's so much in that, Jude. I think I want to step back slightly and think about where we are positioning adaptation full stop. And it tends to sit on the sidelines, despite all the brilliant work that is being carried out by everybody on this call. When I did the London Climate Resilience Review, I wanted to, rather than come up with a whole set of new recommendations where there were already brilliant recommendations in place, amplify those. And to put it crudely, follow the money. It came up in the early polls of this meeting that financing this is going to be absolutely critical. But we all know, those of us that are attending today, that unless we lock in climate resilience rather than locking in vulnerability, everything that our current government is aiming to do around growth could literally wash away in a flood or melt in a heat wave. We have to look at some very, very practical things that can be done today, which allow us to, rather than thinking, isn't it great we've doubled a flood budget, think about how we as a community access some of the far more significant budgets that exist across our government, either at a national level or at a local level. And I think it's really clear that some of this money and powers and making it a statutory duty needs to sit at the right level at this country. But not celebrate that we've increased modest budgets. I appreciate we're operating in a world where all budgets are constrained, but try and influence those with greater budgets, transport, health, etc., to understand how if we either get this right now or we get it wrong, and we'll be living the consequences, as David so eloquently put, for decades, if not centuries to come. I think a lot of how we respond is down to how we know how our neighbours are behaving too. A lot of the basic things that will help people in communities like Freetown, where I'm going later today to look at some of the shelters, the heat shades that are now covering markets to help people working outside survive extreme heat, comes through what we know our neighbours are doing. And David was in the background this morning helping me log in from Sierra Leone. We need to apply that at all levels in our work, because people are going to get angry. It came across in that Defra science-wise, the word clouds that were put into that report. Some work I am doing this year will take more account of public opinion, who don't understand don't understand the policy framing of adaptation, but do understand when they've been flooded, do understand when they are too hot in the houses that were only built yesterday or last year, but also make sure that we are joining these things up. I looked at the extreme heat section of the recently published National Risk Register, and it talked about sunburn. We had in 2022 3,000 excess deaths across the UK, over 300 in London alone. We're not joining up the dots in terms of those working on policy in understanding the impacts that have already happened from our changing climate. So everybody involved in this agenda, involved in MACC, needs to work out how we communicate so we cut through and follow the money and work out how we can get the right enabling framework that will allow money to flow through to the work that is urgently needed to underpin our economy and, more importantly, lives and livelihoods, because that is what is needed now. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, I mean, locking in resilience rather than locking in vulnerability. I think that's really powerful. And also, as you say, making that connection between on the ground action that really affects people's lives and livelihoods, and also putting in place those systemic changes that need to happen to enable money to flow in the right direction. And finally, I'm going to bring David back in now. It seems like a really sort of pertinent point to finish this discussion on. David, that idea of resilience and vulnerability, and obviously you can talk from an infrastructure perspective, but the infrastructure, as we said earlier, underpins society and our ability to be resilient to climate shocks. And we've heard about, the storms that we've suffered over the last couple of months. So yeah, what's your priorities for the next NAP?
Yeah, I just want to continue a theme that Emma brought up actually on heating, because a year and a half ago, I wrote a blog post saying, is Wales ready for 50 degrees temperatures in our towns and cities? And I actually said, I think that future might seem scary given the infrastructure we've got now, but if we plan right and we build right and we integrate nature as much as possible into our urban areas, we could have towns and cities that are even better than the ones we experience now, as long as we get things right. So there's a future there, which on the face of it could be quite scary. I think it has the potential to be a brilliant future, but we need to grab hold now of the changes that are likely to come and plan effectively for them. You know, trees and green infrastructure are a very, very important part of that future. Talking of no regrets, trees also are a massive help when it comes to holding moisture in the soil and maintaining good local habitats. So I think one of the interesting things we published last October, we published a report on flooding in Wales. By 2050, how can we make the impacts of flooding less in Wales? Many good recommendations in there that you might be interested in taking a look at. But the one that we are trying to implement ourselves is to have nature as part of our decision-making processes. So at the moment, people say, okay, well, nature's so important, you know. Well, yeah, it underpins everything. But nature doesn't have a voice, and we're learning from other people who are pathfinders in this. We want to be the first public sector body in Wales that has nature as one of the commissioners or has a voice on the commission to influence our decision making. And we need to start thinking far more agilely as well. So I'll give you a very quick case study of a policy in Wales called Town 15, which was meant to prevent building basically on flood prone areas. It got rejected because local authorities said, we can't possibly meet the targets that you've given us for housing and development if you implement Town 15. So there's a bit of back and forth. Welsh government backed off. Then lo and behold, there's a whole series of floods, and suddenly that resistance is crumbling. Now, the systems and the processes are not agile enough for the local authorities to say to Welsh government, you need to change your expectations of us on our housing targets, on our business development targets. Otherwise, this Town 15 is going to cripple us and we won't meet your other targets. So on your Mentimeter earlier, I think fourth on the list was leadership and integrated strategic thinking. The systems and processes can't allow for that. Once you've got a local development plan, it seems hands off for 5 or 10 years, you know? So we need to have our own internal processes up to the case, really, for allowing us to adapt. Our own processes don't allow our systems that we've built up in society to adapt sufficiently quickly.
Brilliant, thanks, David. And that whole adaptive planning concept is a critical theory of how you produce a really fantastic adaptation plan. Emma will know this, very familiar with T2100, which is, you know, gold standard of that approach, which allows for that sort of adaptive thinking. And yes, my other job that I do for the rest of the week is in the green infrastructure team at the Greater London Authority, which is our trees and green space, which is absolutely vital to ensure resilience of societies going forward with the climate shocks that we know we're going to get. So I'm going to finish up there. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank what was an absolutely brilliant panel. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much, Emma, for dialing in from Sierra Leone. And thank you to Victoria.
Freetown,
David.
the Tree Town.
Sorry, Freetown.
Freetown, the Tree Town.
Freetown, the Tree Town. To Rebecca, to Victoria, to David, thank you very, very much. And I'll hand back over to Helen.
Thank you very much. And yeah, it's really difficult. These one-way kind of feeds are very difficult because you get nothing back from the audience. So no, I really enjoyed that. So we're moving on to another Mentimeter before we'll take a short break. I'm not sure how many of you are still remembering the agenda. We're running a little bit late, but we've got a bit of slack in the second hour. So we'll pass over to Giovanna for the second Mentimeter.
Hello,
Giovanna, introduce yourself as well.
Yes. Hello, I'm Giovanna Gini. I'm the postdoctoral fellow at the MACC, basically at the Hub, based in King's College. So basically today I will be addressing the section of the MACC that is dealing with training. Which I already noticed that there is some comments around training, and to understand a little bit about how to translate knowledge into practical action. Training is like the channel. So if Shreya, if you can put the first question. So the first question I will ask, obviously, this is like probably they will need more time and more space for thinking. But just the first thing that comes in your mind, what is the biggest challenge in translating climate change or climate adaptation knowledge into action? Amazing. And just because it needs to be very fast, I would just read a couple of them. So financing, time and money, capacity, short finance cycles, capitalism, scale, funding. Funding, it keeps on coming. Apparently funding is one of the big issues for, in translating knowledge into action. Awareness and implementation, lack of technical knowledge, funding, lack of funding, funding and governance. Perfect. So just we will go to the second question, which is, if you could redesign climate adaptation training, what will be your top priority? In the sense, like if you could, teach how to keep people or actors how to adapt, what will be the way to do it? Focus on how to address vulnerability, climate literacy, empowerment, interdisciplinary and strategic thinking, consider co-benefits. Accessibility to all, shared vision and ownership, make it practical. Perfect. If anyone wants to expand their question, feel free to do it, or their input. Feel free to do it in the Q&A box. And also, like, I'm open to receive any sort of more in-depth input. You can email me. So thank you so much. I will pass to Helen again.
Thank you. And thank you, Giovanna. And this is just to get us thinking, because there is a big, not a big, but there's a training component to the MACC. And I think it's been actually in the Q&A, the level of expertise and the expertise required moving forward. Just to summarize again, any questions you put in, we will summarize and answer and circulate after. And if we can get to it, if one of the team can get to it during the conversation, we will also respond in. We'll also circulate all our email addresses. So we'll circulate how to get in touch with Giovanna if you're interested in, for example, the training on adaptation, for example. With that, I'm going to pass to a 5-minute break. So we'll have 5 minutes where we can go and get a cup of tea, go to the loo, and we will be back here at 7 minutes past, where we'll actually start to hear from the MACC project. So we're the hub that's coordinating the adaptation. Well, we're trying to sort of catalyze action in the adaptation community writ large, but also the 6 key MACC projects, and we'll hear from each of them at 7 minutes past. So see you soon. Okay, if those who are leading the MACC projects could turn the cameras on and I know when you're back, that would be amazing. I will never know if anyone's there. It's just you and me, Shreya.
I'm here too.
Perfect, thank you. Right. Okay, maybe we'll assume that everyone's back. It's so disconcerting. And I will pass over to Johnny to slowly get us started on look at all those thumbs up. Great. Introducing the MACC research projects. Over to you, Johnny.
Thanks, Helen. Morning, everyone. So I'm Johnny Casey. I'm Head of Climate Ready Leadership at the Scottish charity Virtue, previously known until last week as Sniffer. Virtue co-leads the Scotland spoke of the Hub in collaboration with the University of Glasgow. And as we heard earlier, UKRI and Defra are investing £15 million as part of Maximising UK Adaptation to Climate Change programme. And that programme looks at how all 4 nations can better address the barriers around public awareness, policy, legislation, and climate data. We take a focus on people-centric approach that addresses the drivers of vulnerability towards systems change for transformational adaptation. So the MACC programme consists of 2 strands. We have the MACC Hub, which is what I'm part of, along with Helen and Shreya and others, focusing on transformative change for a well-adapted UK and bringing together stakeholders from across the UK collaborative action. And there were also 6 research projects delivering new transdisciplinary knowledge for UK climate adaptation. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by team members from 6 of the research projects that will address critical issues and opportunities for adaptation across the UK. So I'm going to introduce each of them first and then ask our first presenter, Sarah Greenham from the University of Birmingham, to present. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Johnny. Can I just confirm that everyone can hear me okay? Lovely.
Yep, we can.
Thank you so much. So yeah, I am Sarah Greenham. I'm a research fellow at the University of Birmingham. I'm here to present on the project that I'm involved in called WM Adapt, which is maximising adaptation to climate change in the West Midlands and beyond. I am presenting on behalf of the project lead, so that's Dr. Emma Ferranti, associate professor at the University of Birmingham in civil engineering. And I believe that some of my colleagues are also on the call. So I think we've got Bethany Haskins-Verheesen, who is the Climate Adaptation Manager at the West Midlands Combined Authority. And I saw Dr. James Hodgson, who is also a research fellow on the project. Next slide, please. To give an overview of the project, the ultimate aim in WM Adapt is to deliver a step change in adaptive capacity for the West Midlands. And in doing that, we aim to achieve it through 3 key work streams. The first one is in co-creating a framework to enable place-based adaptation, but heavily involving communities within the West Midlands region, collecting community perspective on adaptation, co-creating and piloting community scale adaptation pathways. So we'll be piloting working with stakeholders at the local level on developing place-based adaptation pathways. The second one, which I'm involved in, is developing new capabilities for mapping climate risk and vulnerability. We have previously been working with the West Midlands Combined Authority and Birmingham City Council to help produce a mapping tool to help with decision making on prioritising where adaptation efforts should take place. And we will be using this project to take that even further with colleagues in improving spatial mapping on overheating, fluvial flood risk, and also develop some additional layers on the health burden and economic impact, and also to test future climate scenarios within that. And finally, the third work stream, which Beth and James are heavily involved in, is creating a route map for building regional adaptive capacity. And what a really important part of that is we're establishing a regional adaptation network called the RAN to identify and co-develop solutions for regional adaptation barriers and to help increase capacity and decision-making efficiency. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a bit of the project scope. So this map is the boundary of the West Midlands region. It represents 7 local authorities, which includes Birmingham, Wolverhampton, Walsall, Sandwell, Dudley, Solihull and Coventry. And as I previously mentioned, it's an extremely local level focus across the region, and we're really focusing on community level engagement throughout. And therefore, stakeholders are extremely important as well, and we are prioritising co-developing of outputs with several different stakeholders, which I will introduce shortly. And an important part that the RAN will also develop is that we will build legacy into the project and therefore be able to hand outputs and processes over so activities can continue beyond the project across the community and with decision makers. And what you're seeing on the map here is the current state of play with the map for mapping climate risk and vulnerability for the West Midlands that we had developed before this, which we are expanding on further, which is called the CRBA. Next slide, please. So I'd like to introduce a little bit to the project partners and the stakeholders involved. So we have 3 work streams, as I mentioned. We've got many different stakeholders, many different people with all sorts of experience contributing to the project. It's being led by ourselves at the University of Birmingham with the support of the West Midlands Combined Authority, private sector Climate Sense, and also Birmingham Voluntary Services Council, the BVSC, and others are involved as well. We have here the West Midlands Resilience Forum, Birmingham City Council, Transport West Midlands, and more. Next slide, please. I won't go into this in a huge amount of detail, but in terms of the workstream pathways to impact, we have lots of different activities within each of the work streams, which are outlined in the different colours. And each of them will be delivering different outputs, and we'll be engaging across the work streams to ensure there's coherence through the outputs. And we see that there are several different short-term outcomes, which is including helping with decision making for policymakers and increasing the knowledge of climate adaptation at the neighbourhood level, which will then lead to longer term outcomes at individual, neighbourhood, service and the broader system level. And ultimately, the impacts of this being a better experience and quality of life for residents, improved ability to withstand weather events and extreme climate impacts, and also more reliable local services for the communities, and a joined up delivery of adaptation in a place-based way that also engages across stakeholders. Next slide, please. We will learn and share the learnings on adaptation. As I've mentioned, the co-development is embedded throughout the project, and we will aim to increase the adaptive capacity across the West Midlands. But that also goes beyond. With using the RAN network, we will facilitate knowledge exchange, and that will be co-delivered with the hub, which I will explain very shortly. We will undertake 2 monthly knowledge exchange seminars, which will take place throughout the project with partner stakeholders and anyone that would be interested in participating. Next slide, please. And that feeds into how we will work directly with the MACC Hub. So our plans for the project are that we will collaborate to share outputs, knowledge, resources. We will look to learn from the other projects that are contributing to the MACC Hub and how we can perhaps work together. And then we will also, as I mentioned, co-deliver a series of knowledge exchange seminars throughout the project. Next slide, please. And thank you very much. I'm sorry that it is very short whistle-stop tour of the project. We could also speak an awful lot more about everything that we're doing. We really look forward to sharing more information as we progress throughout the project with the MACC Hub. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Sarah. That was wonderful and great to see that regional place-based approach to adaptation through that research project. I'm delighted now to invite Candice Howarth from the Grantham Research Institute at LSE to talk about the research project she's leading, Attenuate. And if I can ask all presenters just to try to keep to the max 5 minutes because we are running a little tight on time. Thanks all.
Great.
Over
Thanks
to you,
so much.
Candice.
Thank you. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay? Great,
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here this morning. I'm going to be presenting on the project that we're going to be running called Attenuate, which is looking at creating the enabling conditions for UK climate adaptation investment. And we're doing this with a series of different partners, which I'll come to at the end of my presentation. Next slide, please. Now, to set this into context a little bit, in the first hour of this launch, we've heard a lot about the need to finance and to resource adaptation, and Attenuate is going to be looking at this. As we already know, the UK is impacted by a range of different climate impacts and risks, and CCRA3 identified over 60 risks that came alongside different opportunities, but also came with very high economic costs. And the third National Adaptation Programme for England set out a series of over 500 actions to address these different risks. But we know that finance is needed to fully deliver the NAP, and estimates are showing that this is going to cost us between 10 and 12 billion pounds per year. And this needs to be split across the public sector and private and households. We need to be seeing much more flows in terms of finance to enable to fill that adaptation finance gap, and so that we can scale up further finance to finance and invest in climate adaptation. Next slide, please. And what we're seeing is we are seeing flows of adaptation finance, but they're considerably less than what we're seeing for mitigation. We do also know that some analysis has been showing that adaptation actions have net economic benefits, so we want to be highlighting those in the project that we have. But those also come with lower financial benefits, they can have long paybacks and low revenues. And alongside this, we know there are a range of different barriers to financing climate adaptation, and we've heard quite a few of them this morning in the different Mentimeter polls and in the panel discussion. And these range from information barriers, market failures, financial barriers, policy and governance barriers, and behavioural barriers. And in order to overcome these different barriers, we need to be building capacity for adaptation finance. We need to be creating those enabling conditions, building directly on what we know those barriers to be. And we need to be thinking very carefully about how the public sector can de-risk and crowd in private sector action. Next slide, please. So Attenuate has 3 objectives in order to address this. Firstly, we want to diagnose and synthesize barriers in UK adaptation finance. We want to do this across different governance levels, and we want to develop and test an integrated multi-level adaptation investment framework, which we'll be exploring and applying across 3 different case studies. Our second objective is looking to quantify the impact that these changes to enabling conditions are likely to have to mobilize adaptation finance. And thirdly, we want to look at the role of storylines, narratives, and participatory approaches to help support effective communication and uptake. We've heard again earlier this morning in the launch that communication is really key, capacity building is key, so we think storylines play a really important role in this. Next slide, please. We're going to be doing this through a series of 4 work packages, which I won't go into too much detail today. There's more information on our website. We'll have a core one around project management, a dedicated one which will be looking at an evidence review and developing this framework, a dedicated work package looking at piloting and developing storylines and the extent to which they can shift the political economy of adaptation policy and bankability. And then we'll have a series of case studies to look at how we can apply this framework in practice and look at improving enabling conditions. Next slide, please. In terms of the impact, well, we hope it's going to be significant. We hope it's really going to help prepare for NAP4. It's going to support West Midlands adaptation strategy, and it's going to help respond to the London Climate Resilience Review. And in particular, some of the impacts that we hope to deliver are through this development of an adaptation investment framework for the UK, by defining and prioritising across different scales, different adaptation measures and the associated costs over time, to create a clearer understanding of how and where public finance could be used to crowd in the private sector, and to understand the impact that improving these enabling environments could have on both public and private investment to address climate risks. Next slide, please. And we're doing this with a range of different partners who are all outlined on this slide. I believe many of them are on this call. And if you could just click again, Freya. In terms of the 3 case studies that we're going to be looking at, if you can click again, Shreya. Thank you. So we have 3 case studies. We're going to have one working ideally, well, hopefully, in collaboration with the Treasury and Defra, which will be looking at flooding and heat risk. We'll have one looking at heat risk and social housing in the London Borough of Hackney. And then we'll be working on a West Midlands Combined Authority case study looking at flooding as well across different environments. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Katy. I think it's absolutely critical that we address this issue of financing adaptation. It was clear from the Menti results earlier that that's a key issue, that funding and finance element that was highlighted. I'm sure the insights from this will be valuable for places and organisations beyond those areas of the case studies as well, and act as real catalysts for change. I'm delighted now to invite Professor Prashant Kumar from the University of Surrey to talk about their research project they're leading, GP for Streets. Over to you, Prashant.
Yep, thank you. Oops. Sorry, I think I need to.
We can
I
hear
need to
you.
vacate. Actually, there's a fire alarm.
Okay. We will. In that case, we'll come back to you in a minute, and we'll pass instead then maybe to Anna from the University College London Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering, while you safely evacuate the building there, Prashant. I hope all is well.
Good luck. Great. Thanks, Johnny. I'm Anna Mavrogianni. I am based at the UCL Institute for Environmental Design and Engineering. It's a part of the Bartlett Faculty of the Built Environment, and I'm a professor of sustainable, healthy, and equitable built environment. It's really exciting to be here today and be part of the MACC program. So we'll be leading one of the 6 research projects, ARCADE, which stands for Accelerating Resilience and Climate Adaptation of Domestic Environments for Vulnerable Populations. Next slide, please. So the overarching aim of the project is to support decision-making in order to maximize the climate change adaptation of UK residential environments that are occupied by heat-vulnerable people, with a specific focus on older people who, as we know, are disproportionately affected by excess heat exposure. In the context of net zero, so energy efficient retrofit and building design and decarbonization. So we will be focusing on those affected by or often excluded from the heat health agenda. We will be building on our previous work on home environments, housing, care homes, a previous project called Climate Care, which was funding under the UK Climate Resilience Programme, an existing project on extra care homes, but also looking at other housing types that often tend to be neglected or fall through the cracks, such as shelter housing and retirement villages, and looking at those complex dynamics of heat management and complex interactions between different occupant groups in these settings. And we plan to look at heat exposures at the indoor-outdoor continuum now and in the future under different climate change projections. So we're a team of academic partners at UCL, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Oxford Brookes University. We have funding non-academic partners, 2 local authorities, the London Borough of Waltham Forest and Oxfordshire County Council, and we'll work very closely with the Met Office and the UK HSA. Next slide, please. So in terms of geographies and key stakeholders, our key stakeholders are policy, national, local government, public health practitioners, and the construction industry. And we have an amazing group of project partners. Some of them might be on the call and will sit at our advisory board. So we will be focusing on the Southeast because this is a priority region for heat mitigation. Specifically, we'll be looking at case studies in Waltham Forest and Oxfordshire, and the recruitment will be facilitated by our local government partners. And we hope that the sample will be stratified in order to represent urban, suburban, and rural locations in order to capture different heat exposure levels in these places. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the overall project. So we will have an overarching theory of change. This is going to be developed as part of Work Package 1, which will be developed from the beginning of the project and will help us evaluate our work throughout the lifetime of the project. We will have 3 work packages expanding or generating new evidence. So we will have work package 2 looking at horizon scanning, work package 3 quantifying the magnitude of current heat risk through indoor monitoring, surveys, interviews, and the development of a heat risk identification tool. And work package 4 will use modeling in order to quantify future heat risks under different climate scenarios. So this will entail neighborhood scale, building level modeling, population health modeling, and a series of health economic analyses. Next slide, please. So this generated evidence on the comfort, health and economic impacts of heat risks, and the empirical insights will feed into Work Package 5, which will focus on decision making. So this is a very key part of our project, and it will consist of 2 parts: participatory systems mapping and decision making support. And this will inform decision making. Next slide, please. So just in order to offer a little bit more detail on this, so the participatory systems mapping component will conduct a series of workshops with stakeholders and decision makers across our key stakeholder groups, and we hope they will work closely with the MACC Hub as well as some of the other research projects where we have identified overlaps and synergies. The aim of these workshops will be to identify viable pathways to overcome implementation barriers for heat adaptation strategies and co-create qualitative models of stakeholder system perceptions of those barriers and opportunities for transformative change. And then the second part will be the decision-making support part, where we'll be integrating recommendations on climate adaptation options into existing strategies, so identifying levers and points where we can intervene in the system in order to maximize adaptation. I think that was my last slide, so if you go to the next slide. So yeah, I'd be very happy to be contacted if anyone would like any further information about this, and I'm really looking forward to sharing outputs as we progress with the project. Thank you all very much for your attention.
Thanks so much, Anna. That was wonderful to see, and really excited to see that very specific focus on some of the more vulnerable populations across the UK, and an issue in terms of, making our housing more resilient that can really resonate with the entire population as well. So that's really exciting to see that coming together. I don't think Pasha is back yet, so I'm going to hand over now to Christopher Yap and Christine Reynolds from the City University of London to introduce their research project on joined up landscapes. Over to you both. Thanks.
Morning. I hope you can hear me okay. My name is Chris Yap. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Centre for Food Policy, and along with my colleague, Dr. Christian Reynolds, I'm the co-lead of the Joined Up Landscapes project. So the project is a response really to the scale of the land use challenge in this country. So we know that we need too many things from our land. We need to produce food, we need to restore nature, we need to adapt to climate change, we need to mitigate climate change, we also need livelihoods, construction materials, all these sorts of things. And there's been a gradual convergence on this as a key issue for meeting multiple societal challenges, both in academia and increasingly in policy circles. We're very excited for the launch of the National Conversation on Land Use, which only came out last week. Our project focuses on the potentials of nature-based solutions within this multifunctional landscape. So what can we do to better understand and to enhance the contribution of nature-based solutions to climate change adaptation in this country? So we recognise that nature-based solutions refer to quite a diversity of practices. They have been understood, they can be defined by the International Union of the Conservation of Nature here as actions to protect, sustainably manage, restore natural and modified ecosystems in ways that address societal challenges effectively and adaptably to provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. But really, this is a discursive intervention. This is a way of grouping together quite artificially a set of practices which have different histories, different potentials, different politics embedded within them. We also recognise that this is a very live issue in the context of land use management in this country, and multiple stakeholders are telling us that the environmental land management schemes that we have in place are simply not sufficient for the scale of change that's needed with regards to our land in this country. At the same time, there's recognition that we need private finance to plug this gap, this delivery gap and this implementation gap. But there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of wariness on the part of farmers and landowners about how these markets will be managed and governed, what risks they might be exposed to, for example. So we have our project, we have a series of work packages, which I'll describe in a moment, and they each have their research questions and they each have their objectives and deliverables. But if I was going to summarize the contributions of this project, what we want to do is to better understand how we can effectively manage, govern and scale nature-based solutions in the medium to long term. How can we effectively integrate nature-based solutions within these multifunctional landscapes? And thirdly, how can we optimize the impacts of different types of nature-based solutions under different climate change scenarios? So we're not case for the potentials and the importance of nature-based solutions. We're thinking about how we can enhance this contribution in the medium to long term. And then just as a sort of meta contribution, we have quite a strong interdisciplinary team. And so we actually think there's some process learnings here. We want to really reflect on what we're doing in terms of actually delivering an interdisciplinary research project that has policy impact as we go. We have 5 overlapping work packages. We have a global review of nature-based solutions led by Christian Reynolds and Kelly Parsons at Cambridge. We have a qualitative work package which combines rapid qualitative assessment with deliberative prioritization workshops, thinking about how people perceive, respond to, understand the barriers and enablers around nature-based solutions, focused at the national level. Our third work package, work package 2 is led by Professor Christina Vogel at City. Work package 3, the test and trial approach, which I'm leading. We're really excited to partner with 2 rivers trusts and a farmers cluster in different parts of England who will be implementing quite innovative forms of nature-based solutions in practice. And we really want to deep dive into the practice, the day-to-day reality of implementing nature-based solutions on farmland that serve multiple outcomes that often involve multiple landowners and these sorts of challenges. Work package 4, led by Katie Manning at King's, is a system dynamics model which integrates some of the latest climate change projection data from the Met Office with inputs from these other work packages. So thinking about actually what these different nature-based solutions offer under different climate change scenarios, not only in terms of temperature, but water availability in different parts of the country, different soil types and such. And finally, we have a capacity building and knowledge exchange work package. And we have a really exciting group of partners who are going to be delivering a range of training and practice guides and dissemination and pedagogical materials based on outputs from those other work packages. The more complicated version of this, we just want to emphasize that actually these work packages really do integrate with one another. They're not just standalone disciplinary pieces, as well as you can see in this box on the right, we are one project, but we're also part of an ecosystem of networks, of projects, of programs and other initiatives, both in academia and policy circles that are interested in climate change adaptation, food systems change and environmental land management more broadly. And lastly, just to say that we have a really fantastic team with co-investigators across King's, York, Cambridge, Harper Adams, Birkbeck, Brunel and City St George's. And we're really excited to begin the project and we're delighted to be part of the MACC Hub. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's really exciting to see that focus on joined up landscapes approaches. And I'm sure there'll be lots of crossover there as well with other related hubs, such as the Land Use for Net Zero Hub as well. Thank you so much, Chris and Christian. I can see that Prashant is now back, hopefully safe back in the office there. I don't know, Shay, if you're able to go back to Prashant's presentation slides, and I'll hand over to you now.
Yeah, my apologies. What a timing of the fire alarm.
So unfortunate, but I'm glad you're okay and all back now.
Yeah. Are you sharing the slides?
I think Shrey is just on it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So first of all, apologies everyone for. So yeah, my name is Prashant Kumar. So I'm from the University of Surrey, and I'll be talking a little bit about the project, which is called GP Forest Streets. So this project is led by the Surrey's Global Centre for Cleaner Research, and we got partners from University of Bath, Sheffield, Bristol, and Imperial. Next slide, please. It is only me who is seeing the 2 slides at the same time, or you're seeing the full screen?
Yeah, I think, Shrey, it's not quite displaying correctly. We can see all the presenter notes, which we can see the presenter version, sorry.
I'm trying again to share.
No problem, yeah. So,
I'm just wondering, in a moment. I'm wondering, basically.
Sorry, with this one I'll have to just speed back.
No problem.
I tried doing the other way. Bear with me, and I'll be with you, Prashant.
Yeah, well, I think we're nearly there. Yeah, so yeah, I think so we got the next click, please. So we got 5 academic partners, and so there is quite a lot of the involvement with the councils. So if you can click next, please. So they come from the areas across the UK, including Surrey County Council, Southend-on-Sea, and some of the charities involved in it, like the Zero Carbon Guildford, as well as Trees for Cities. So the whole idea of the project is also building upon so next click, please, on the Reclaim Network Plus, for which we run here. So that's looking into the implementation of the green-blue infrastructure in the urban environments. Next, please. Yeah, next. Yeah, so the whole idea of the project is could we create the DIY, the green-blue infrastructure solutions as a green prescription for urban streets for the climate adaptation. So you could see quite a few photos, and if you click one more time, then you'll see quite a few others. So the whole idea there has been that the streets are the heart of the neighborhoods, but they are mostly most often they're deprived areas in terms of the green and blue infrastructure. So our vision for this project is to transform these streets with the different the DIY solutions. So the whole idea has been to create actually the green prescription for the streets, which is accessible, cost effective, and easy to implement. Next, please. So there are like 5 objectives of the project. So the one is focused around the co-design of the DIY greening solutions. So this is where we have the involvement of our, the stakeholders, including quite a few, the number of placemaking schemes which are going around, and then establishing those case studies. And those case studies are usually at 2 levels. The one is more on a household level. The other one is more on a street level. And then we got the modeling activities in terms of scaling up the interventions and then optimizing the benefits. So one of the key activities is also to develop a GP4 streets, a decision-making tool that could embed some of the guidances and some of the policy briefs and so on as part of this exercise. Next, please. So there are like 5 the work packages. The 4 of them are technical. So first one is looking into the case studies. So these are usually the case studies at the household level. What you could do in front of the houses or in the back garden of the houses, and then the other one is more looking at the street level, and there is a component of the involvement of the people who could also help with some of the data collection. And the second work package is looking into the numerical models. So we are looking into some of the models for the different aspects like the air pollution, overheating, flooding, the health and well-being. And the third one, looking into different types of these assessments, which is looking into the ecological assessment, mental health and well-being, and the uptake of effective the innovations in communities. And the fourth work package is mostly developing the tool and embedding the findings across the project and across the programs wherever they could fit into the project. The next, please. So yeah, the finally what we are expecting is this multi-criteria decision-making tool, so that could help optimize these GBGI solutions, producing some of the evidence-based guidelines that could be adopted by the councils and by the communities, and at the same time developing the evidence base, which is currently missing in quite a few of these areas. Next, please. So yeah, I mean, I think I'll stop here, but if you are interested, you could just visit the website, which is gp4streets.org. So that's currently functional. And we are also having, providing updates on X and the Blue Sky, as well as on LinkedIn. So I would encourage you to, kind of follow and share your thoughts and, and see an opportunity to work together. So with that, I would like to thank all the partners and all the funders and our supporters for the project. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Prashant. And yeah, excited to see how the project evolves and helps us to move towards greater blue-green infrastructure across our urban environments as well, and also thinking about the sort of the maintenance of those over time as well. I'm excited now to introduce our final research project presenter, which is Anna Taylor from the Food Foundation, to talk about their research project on adapting to climate-induced food price shocks in the UK. So over to you, Anna.
Thanks very much, Johnny. Hi, everybody. So yes, we're talking about, our project is focused on the climate impacts on food production, but how that flows through to inflationary effects here in the UK, and the knock-on impacts on diet, food security, and health outcomes for the UK population. So if you could move to the next slide, please, Shreya. I'm from the Food Foundation. We're one of the partners in the project, focused on the stakeholder and policy engagement part, along with the team at ECIU, the Energy and Climate Intelligence Unit. The project is being led by Professor Pete Smith at the University of Aberdeen. He couldn't be here today, but and you can see there on the screen the academics in the team, also from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, the University of Sheffield, and very importantly, Max Kotz from the Barcelona Supercomputing Centre. I'll explain why he's such a critical part of this project in just a moment. If you could move on to the next slide, please, Shreya. We positioned the project really as in the context of what's happening in the UK at the moment, both with the challenges that we're facing in public health, with really diet being the biggest single cause of preventable disease now in the UK, and that flowing through to high levels of economic inactivity due to ill health in later life, in a context of facing a lot of important decisions about where we go with our farming sector, the extent to which the level of emphasis we place on growing food here in the UK to feed ourselves versus importing it, some of the challenges of trying to meet both our nature, climate, and public health and food security aspirations all at once, and the implications of that for both the National Food Strategy, which has both been recently announced, and also the 25-year plan for farming. So the project is positioning itself really as making a contribution to all of these policy conversations. If you could move on, please, Shreya. There's obviously a big body of evidence. If you could just click through twice more. Yeah, a big body of evidence looking at the impact of climate change on food production, particularly around staple crops, but less evidence and also very little in the UK, looking at how that translates through to inflationary effects. These are just 3 recent examples which have been well documented, but there are many more. And if you could click through to the next slide, what the team at Barcelona will be bringing is they'll be building on some modelling work which has been done for the European Central Bank. In fact, I think they first coined this phrase, climateflation. And this modelling work has been done for multiple countries. And what we're going to be doing is building on that model and providing a much more in-depth and textured analysis for the UK. So we'll be drawing, if you could click through to the next slide, we'll be looking at this modelling both historically, looking at how climateflation impacted food prices during the cost of living crisis, and what we know about the impacts that had on household food security, the quality of diets and health outcomes, but also looking prospectively with a view to looking at what impacts that could have, climateflation could have going forward, and what are some of the strategies that policymakers and businesses could adopt to try and mitigate some of those, or build resilience to some of those climate inflationary effects. So from the policy side, we're particularly interested in looking at the programs that are in place around nutritional safety nets. For example, the programs like Free School Meals and Healthy Start, which are there to build resilience amongst the most vulnerable households, but at the moment they're perhaps not doing enough to buffer some of these households when they're facing these inflationary effects. So we're going to be exploring what the implications of the modelling work might be for some of those public programmes, but also what the implications might be for both public procurement, agricultural subsidy programmes and supply chain fairness, in thinking about how we actually build the resilience of British farmers to those shocks, and the knock-on impacts that has on supply chains and supermarket behaviour in particular. So we'll be using a whole set of different data that will be then linking to the climate inflation model through to what we know about the impacts on food price, on expenditure through Kantar data, and then what we know about the impacts on food insecurity and health outcomes through a health model. So telling the story right the way through. Hopefully, perhaps you can move on to the last slide, please. And we're embedding within this a very strong element of stakeholder engagement. We've got 3 stakeholder groups, farmers, food charities, who are obviously picking up the pieces when there are food inflationary shocks in communities, and also policymakers who are obviously got a range of tools at their disposal for building the resilience of households to shocks going forward. They'll be strongly involved in the project throughout, and they'll be doing a kind of, we've got a whole set of sort of policy related outputs planned, but also a kind of steady stream of communications which are going to be telling the story to the public and through the media about explaining these connections between climate shocks and how and why these flow through to prices going up of individual items in their shopping baskets, and trying to use that as a way of really explaining some of the climate change impacts on people's everyday lives. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thanks so much to all the research project presenters for outlining your work. And we're really excited here at the Hub to collaborate with these 6 research projects over the coming months and to help share the insights and evidence to stakeholders from across the UK. I'm going to hand back now to Helen to take us through on the last section of today's webinar. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for those presentations. I think I'm going to pass to Emma. Well, we're a little behind schedule, probably predictably as academics. And so we will, but I want to have this Mentimeter, which is about a key part of the Hub is the Flexible Fund. It's a key way that we can engage people on into Hub activities and into the MACC programme. And it's a key way that we can address some of the, there's a portfolio approach across the MACC programme, and it's a key way that we can fill some knowledge gaps in there. So Emma, are you there?
I am. Thanks, Helen. Hi, everybody. I'm Emma McKinley. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at Cardiff University and part of the MACC Hub. I'm the lead alongside the Severn Estuary Partnership for the Welsh Spoke, but also co-leading a lot of the work around the Flexible Fund. As Helen mentioned, this will be a funding opportunity that's delivered through the MACC Hub to support and complement some of the existing research and practice that's already happening, and then also some of the project work that you've heard about this morning. So we are in the process of scoping the fund and what that might look like and what the call for project applications will look like. We're expecting that to go live early summer, so probably late May, early June. And we're going to make sure that we allow for all the different summer holiday periods and stuff, so that we ensure that there's kind of time for everybody to submit their proposals. The idea that these will be very place-based, very community-focused, and very much focused around applying some work to look at adaptation. So we wanted to use the opportunity where we had all of you together to ask you some questions about what the flexible fund could look like, because we are still very much in that scoping phase of that work, and we'll feed back to you all in a couple of months' time. So Shreya, if I could have the first question on the Mentimeter, please. The first is, what would your priorities be for funding projects through the MACC Hub Flexible Fund? That could be topics, that could be support that you might need, a really broad range of, that can be as broad as you want it to be, really. We just want to get feedback on what your priorities would be as a community. We will send these questions around to allow for some further feedback on them following this webinar. So we're starting to see some come through. So engagement of businesses in adaptation, including Northern Ireland. Yes, we'll absolutely be taking a portfolio approach in terms of topic, sector and geography. So we'll make sure we include that in there. Multi-year community capacity building. So I should mention that in terms of the funding, there will be a pot of up to £600,000 available for the flexible fund, and we're expecting to fund anything between 8 and 12 projects, which will probably last up to 12 months, starting late 2025 into early 26, to allow them to conclude before the end of the programme. So that's great. We're seeing some responses come in. I know we're tight on time, so if you could keep those coming in, but I'm also going to move us on to the next question, please, Shreya. So to ensure that we provide as much support around the implementation of the flexible fund, and also the applications for the flexible fund, so that could be in supporting potential applicants to think about how they can engage with communities. We'd love some ideas of what you would like us to cover in these sessions. We'll be providing guidance on eligibility and the types of projects, so we've got that already. And the context setting, yes, we're doing some work in one of our work packages to look at what already exists and how we can ensure we don't duplicate the wheel. So it's really great to know that that would be something that we want to make sure we include in the scoping as well. Constraints, limitations, sandpits, yes, that we'll definitely be making sure we integrate some planning around sandpits to support collaboration and networking that can be used to support the applications as well. Thank you very much for those ideas. It's amazing what you can do in 2 minutes. It's great. Look at all these responses. Thank you very much. I'm super conscious of time, so I'm going to move us on again to the third and final question. Thank you for those ideas. We'll look at those, and as I said, we'll definitely come back to you all for more responses. And then finally is whether you'd prefer those sessions to be virtual or in person. We have potential to run both types of sessions. So we'd love to get feedback on what would be most valuable for the community across the UK. And we are seeing a very significant preference for virtual meetings. Okay, oh no, in person's creeping up. Great, that's really, really useful to see. So it might be that we run multiple virtual sessions and maybe just have 1 or 2 smaller in-person sessions if that's what's most appropriate. Again, as I said, we'll make sure to come back to you through the MACC Hub newsletter. So please keep an eye out on that for an opportunity to feedback further into these questions. Thank you for responding so rapidly, and I'll hand back over to Helen. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Emma, for talking at double speed and getting through that. And thanks, everybody, for inputting. So that we can leave on time, I'm going to give 5 minutes to Shreya to talk us through some of the initial ways to get involved with us and with the Hub. And then just as we close, hopefully we can end 1 or 2 minutes over time. So go for it, Shreya. You've got 5 minutes.
Thanks, Ellen. Hi, everyone. My name is Shreya, and I'm the MACC Hub manager. So I'll take the next 10 minutes to update you on a few upcoming ways to involve with the Hub, the advisory board call, the knowledge portal, the workshops, conferences, our newsletter, and the job opportunities. So all this information will be shared in a follow-up email sent by us, and details will be shared through the Hub's monthly newsletters. So the Hub is forming its advisory board, and the call for board members is live now, and a deadline of February 17th. We encourage you to apply or share it within your networks to ensure that we reach a diverse and engaged group from across sectors, the 4 nations, and internationally. So my colleague must have dropped the link by now in the chat with all the details of the advisory board and how to get registered with us to get more updates on the MACC Hub and the wider program. So this is the first sneak peek at a Hub knowledge portal. This is the first time we're showcasing it to anybody externally. So it's still in development. This currently is just a skeleton site, but we're excited to share a preview. So this portal serves as a central location for sharing outputs, knowledge, collaboration, building community. So as you can see on my left, there's this, Hub Adapt UK map. And the initial point of engagement will be to register your institution on this platform and share the case studies. We'll also be organizing workshops to co-develop the full website. So we're building this map, a map of climate change adaptation projects, and eventually this will add functionality such as network maps. So once you register, you can have a look at the website, you can register yourselves, have updates, look at the resources, and everything that we have on with the website. Now I'll move on to the annual conferences. We plan to hold an annual conference in each of the UK nations, with the first taking place in Scotland on September 23rd. This will serve as a key opportunity to share best practices on transformational adaptation. Then training and continuous learning is a key part of the Hub, and each regional spoke will be hosting a series of various workshops to provide training on systems thinking, using weather data, address policy, knowledge gaps, and facilitate cross-sector collaboration. We basically want to focus on how, through these trainings and collaboration events, we want to draw in the wider community within what we are researching and what we are presenting. So we recently put out a call for evidence to understand key levers of change in adaptation, and to develop a working definition of adaptation. Moving on, as Emma talked about flexible funds, we'll have a forthcoming call for the flexible fund, a funding opportunity designed to trial community-led transformational adaptation projects. It'll be launched in the summer. Once the funding call is announced, we'll host a sandpit sessions to help researchers, practitioners connect, form partnerships, and develop stronger grant application. Then the policy research unit will also launch a series of project calls that directly respond to government needs and priorities. Details to be shared in due course, with opportunities advertised on our LinkedIn page, website, and newsletter. I think my colleague by now, Joanna must have shared the links to everything, and I encourage you to sign up for the newsletter to stay informed of upcoming opportunities from the MACC program as well as the Hub. Thank you, everyone, and I'll pass it on to Helen now.
Amazing, you did it, Giovanna, in 4 minutes. Oh, that's Shreya in 4 minutes. And Giovanna, if you can put the info in the chat, that would be amazing. But if not, no worries, we will send in the follow-up email to this all the information. So it just leaves me to say thank you. We've covered a lot in 2 hours. I really appreciate the time you've given us being here. I'm not sure how much we delivered. I'm not sure how much you've understood as to what MACC is, but hopefully more than before you joined the call. And please follow us on LinkedIn. On LinkedIn, when you get the link, please sign up to our newsletter, and that's where we can keep. And what we're going to keep doing is keep increasing the opportunities to get involved and to inform this.